Today, I'm on the northern section of Lake Okeechobee in an area called Eagle Bay. There's a beautiful park here with picnic tables, a boat ramp, and a pier that you can walk out on. It's also a very popular place for bird watching, hiking, canoeing, and kayaking. Starting in September of this year, contractors working for the FWC sprayed this bay for 3 weeks. The target was water lettuce. That's the floating plant that's lighter color green. They started inside the bay spraying the hundreds of tiny islands of bulrush. That's the tall, darker green grass that you see here. The water lettuce gets stuck around the bulrush, so when they spray the water lettuce, they get the bulrush too. Very little of the poison is hitting the intended plants. Just look at how much goes straight into the water. Bulrush is a very important native plant that grows up from the bottom and offers critical habitat for many aquatic critters. Some scientists estimate that 70% of all the bulrush is now gone on Lake Okeechobee. If this spraying continues, we could lose the remaining bulrush, and that would be a disaster. Bulrush has to have a hard bottom to grow in. It cannot root in muddy bottoms, so bass anglers use the bulrush as an indicator of hard bottom. Bass also need the hard bottom to spawn in, so when you see bulrush, you know the area is a possible spawning site for bass. As these plants all die from the herbicides, they sink to the bottom and cover it with a thick layer of mud, making the bulrush unable to grow back in this area. Water lettuce is the easiest plant to mechanically harvest. The harvesters have an underwater bar that pushes over the bulrush so that they can scoop up the floating plants and leave the bulrush completely unharmed. The owners of one of Florida's largest harvesting companies told me that their floating plant harvesters have been sitting in mothballs for decades because the FWC has not given them one single contract to harvest floating plants. The FWC will tell you that this spraying kills the invasive plants and then allows the native plants to come back. But if they would actually go out on the lakes, they would find the exact opposite is happening. The invasives are the ones that are coming back because they grow much faster, so this spraying is actually causing the invasive plants to grow out of control. After dousing the tiny islands, they moved out of the bay and started spraying the giant floating mats of water lettuce. With all these plants to spray, you would think that they could keep the spray on just the lettuce, but as you can see here, he is just showering the open water. As he comes to the end, he doesn't shut the nozzle off. He keeps it running the whole time he turns the boat around. At the rate he is spraying this poison, he will go through an entire tank in just 20 to 30 minutes. We have talked to several ex-spray guys, and they told us that it was nothing to go through 10 tanks in one day. Looks like another turn without shutting the hose off. Just look at the poison going straight in the water. Unbelievable. I returned a week later to see the devastation, but first I want to show you again what the bulrush looked like when we sprayed it. It was a nice dark green. This is how the bulrush islands look now. They are completely brown from all this spraying. The FWC will tell you that the bulrush will turn brown, but it will magically come back to life. Does this bulrush look like it's coming back to life to you? There was dead bulrush everywhere. The reeds were all piling up against the shorelines, and in some places the water lettuce was still green. These are crimes against nature. I just don't know how the FWC can justify this. Many of the small islands were completely annihilated. I actually saw some of the bulrush that was still dead, and the water lettuce under the bulrush was already starting to turn green again. So much for the theory that the native plants will be the one that comes back after the invasives are killed off. Farther out in the lake, the devastation was even greater. This is the largest plant annihilation that I have witnessed to date. There were hundreds of acres of dead and rotting vegetation floating on the surface, soon to be on the bottom. You can see here the green strips where they missed spraying as they traveled through the plants. Thank God they weren't very good at doing their job. At least they left a few plants still alive. Hopefully some of the small critters can take shelter in these few green areas that were spared. As the wildlife was concentrated on these green areas, I saw several territorial disputes between limpkins. Look in the water and you can see clumps of black rotting vegetation. This is a process called anaerobic fermentation. That's when the bacteria sucks up all the oxygen in the water and starts producing methane gas. All these rotting plants then float back to the surface because of the gas. This is how dead zones are created on our lakes. It will take a long time for this part of the lake to be able to support life again. There were lots of birds here to my surprise. This spraying started a feeding frenzy. These birds were taking advantage of the poisoned minnows, frogs, shrimps, and aquatic critters. Unfortunately, these chemicals are now accumulating inside the bodies of these birds. This is how we almost drove bald eagles to extinction in the United States. Farmers used DDT on their crops and poisoned the rodents, and then the bald eagles ate the rodents. It's a real shame that humans cannot learn from our past mistakes. Now our environment will have to suffer the same consequences all over again. The future of these birds is not a pretty one. They will probably have to endure a slow and painful death, just like humans do when we die from pesticide exposure. This is a limpkin, and it only eats snails. I hovered over it for 10 minutes, watching to see if it could catch a snail, but no luck. These are common gallinules, and they only eat aquatic plants. As they consume these poison plants, the chemicals will build up in their bodies, and they will probably suffer the same fate as all the other birds. Most people do not realize how dire the situation is in the state of Florida. Most of our lakes are on the verge of collapse, and if we don't get this spraying stopped, Lake Okeechobee will become a dead lake, just like Lake Apopka. There is only one person that can stop it, and that is Governor Ron DeSantis. I need everyone listening to this video to call or email him and demand that he stops this spraying.